Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 14, Episode 90. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here this Wednesday, Steelers Nation. And Dave, the Pittsburgh Steelers know how to keep us busy. Just a little bit later on a pretty quiet Monday, did the podcast, wondered what are you going to write about, find about, and they gave us plenty. 3 releases: quarterback Mitch Trubisky, offensive tackle Chukwuma Okorafor, and punter Pressley Harvin, all released by the Pittsburgh Steelers, on top of other moves, cap implications for that. We have a lot to discuss.
Yeah, that had to be, in my recollection, one of the busiest Steelers news-related, I guess, days overall for a Monday after the Super Bowl. Kind of really uncharacteristic with them. Essentially getting cap casualties out the door, the day after the Super Bowl. Generally, this team waits, 10 days, 14 days out, sometimes even shorter than that, to the start of the new league year before you see these kind of moves. So a little break from norm when it comes to that. And as you stated, we got a lot to talk about in related to all that news.
Yeah, so again, Okorafor and Trubisky released. They were due mid-March roster bonuses. We did not anticipate, I should say, either being picked up by the team, but to see the release this early, is this just a let's get it done because we know it's the decision? Is this a let's allow them to get a jump on free agency? Why do you think this is happening so quickly and so soon?
Yeah, I thought about that and kind of the reasoning why behind all of it. Why now? Look, these are two of these people, Trubisky and Okorafor. We had a good idea those guys were not going to see their roster bonuses there. Why this early? I think you hit on a lot of it. I think common courtesy of the writing was well on the wall with both of those two, and why not give them the courtesy to hit the market way early in this thing. Second, and maybe specifically more to a guy like Okorafor, do you want him out there working out and maybe running a potential? I mean, I don't know the exact rules behind that. Do you want him to risk any sort of injury, working out on his own that might, precipitate you having to hold on to him? Generally, that's not the case because, I mean, look, you every offseason you have a list of guys that you're pretty sure that are going to be out the door, but even so, those guys are retained. I mean, when was William Jackson III let go last offseason? Because it kind of a similar situation outside of, I can't remember if he had a roster bonus or not due, but obviously a very large salary that was due, but they waited on him. So it probably might be less related to that. This might just be come down to just a course of action. Look, these guys weren't going to be with us. We already had the meetings. We made the decisions. They're not going to be with us. Let's give them the common courtesy of sending them, out the door right now, because they just are not going to be part of our future.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we knew Okorafor, no chance he was going to come back. I mean, with Trubisky, again, I mentioned this Monday, the only thought to him potentially being around past that deadline was, if there was still enough uncertainty at the quarterback position, with Rudolph still in flux and not clear what other veteran could potentially get signed and be brought in, would you have Trubisky as an insurance policy? But it really wasn't worth it. And given the fact that you probably have an idea what your quarterback room will look like, at least in terms of competition for Kenny Pickett by that Trubisky deadline, there was really no need to entertain the idea of picking that up and carrying him for any length of time. So I mean, Trubisky just imploded, obviously, in 2023, failed in his 2 starts, and, just the mechanics were poor, the turnovers too numerous, and once he got benched, that writing was on the wall.
Right. And looking back, March 10th last year was when William Jackson III was let go. So, and that obviously was about a week before the start of free agency and the start of the new league year. So, this just might be just a change of the way they do business. Why put off the inevitable? As far as that goes now, you make a good point with the whole Mitch Trubisky thing, and we kind of hit on this the other day. I mean, it's rare to see this team get down to one quarterback under contract in the room, And look, for all we know, maybe they've already done a lot of the hard negotiations with a guy like Mason Rudolph. For all we know, I mean, the way this thing is going, 24 hours from now, you might have something else to talk about on the Friday show. Yeah, I think it would obviously be rare. They would have to blow Rudolph's doors off, to get him to sign this early in the offseason. But stranger things, I guess, have happened there. So look, the long and short of it is, it's not a shock that those two specifically are out the door. The shock is the timing of it all.
Mm-hmm. Right. That was surprising for it to be the day after the Super Bowl, the first team to really make those moves around the league. When you look back on Okorafor, that extension they gave him in 2022, now that was pre-con, that was when Kevin Colbert was still the GM. It didn't make much sense at the time, and looking back, it obviously did not work out the way the team envisioned.
Yeah, it was questionable, most certainly at the time that deal got done. Now, I'd have to look back in where the team sat as far as cash versus cap, and the 90% rule, and if that if he was just the most logical at the time to give the money to because of longer term plans. But you get yourself in trouble on top of it, though, by just giving bad contracts away in general, because there's always the next free agency cycle where, okay, well, we didn't spend the money that we thought we were going to have to spend this offseason. There's still the third year of because I believe this past season was the third and final year of that first 3-year cycle of 90% cash or 90% of the total cap for the 3-year period and all. But yeah, I mean, and look, there was a lot of question about this time last year, whether or not Okorafor would see that roster bonus that he had due, I believe, in March. But the team does not have a history of barring really injury or super bad play, of sending guys out the door. And obviously the tackle room hasn't been all that deep all throughout this period. On top of it, now here's the thing, had Okorafor not said whatever it is that he had said midway through the season that got himself benched, I mean, obviously at some point Broderick Jones was going to see the field, and Okorafor, for them to be spending that kind of money that they were spending on him last year, his play would have had to been mighty poor for him to be the guy out instead of Broderick Jones. Would we have had Okorafor not got himself in the doghouse with whatever he had said? Would we have then in turn seen him continue at right tackle and Broderick Jones take over at left tackle? And then that's the way things had gone. And then would this team had even gotten to the point where they are now of thinking, well, we got to send Okorafor packing? Odds are probably good either way that would have been the case, but I mean, Okorafor still would have had another half of the season to change the narrative on himself. You see what I'm saying?
Sure, I do. I mean, you never know for sure how this thing would have played out. I mean, you did get a starting tackle who was not terrible, but even at the time, like I don't view this contract as a bad contract solely in hindsight, which of course is easy to do. But even at the time, I think you and I were kind of like, what is the real motivation to get this kind of deal at that kind of salary for Chukwuma Okorafor? I didn't see it. My thought, and I'm kind of trying to think back to the time, but that was really when their O-line was in flux, completely,
right.
Retooled, the old guard of DeCastro and Pouncey, all of them gone. And they were having to plug at left tackle with rookies and Moore and Green at center. And I don't think they wanted to create an additional need at right tackle. And because Okorafor was there and had some tenure and was competent, at least they decided let's lock that down so we can focus on the rest of the line, as opposed to now having to find a starting right tackle, which is not an easy thing to do. It's expensive in free agency, and the draft doesn't always provide that. So I think they just kind of put themselves into a corner with all the O-line changes they were making and said, this guy's here, he's decent, let's just take care of him and focus on the rest of the line.
Right. And what you just said, I mean, it was right ahead, I think, of free agency. He was set to become an unrestricted free agent at the time, right? So at that time, you had to look ahead at the holes that you had on the roster, what may or may not have been available in free agency, how much you would have had to spend to go that route, what you were staring at in the draft at that time. So it might have been just one of those unique situations where they were in a hole, and this is the kind of money that they had to spend to make sure they closed up that hole.
Right. Now, I don't say that to excuse it. I just say it to explain it. I think it was a poor decision, and it didn't work out the way that the team had hoped. It's not incredibly costly to the team. How much dead money is created with this release?
Where do I have it on one of these 1,000 spreadsheets that I have open here right now? It is a little over $3 million in dead money on him,
which is not horrendous, obviously, with the cap increasing. Pittsburgh does do a good job of always giving themselves those get out of jail, mostly free cards when they structure these contracts. And that's because they don't, guarantee money in the second and third years like a lot of teams do, and probably some other reasons that you can explain. So it's not crushing the team, but the decision itself to extend him long-term at the time was, I think, dubious.
Let's see. He in 2000, the first year that he signed that deal in 2022, he earned a total of $10.5 million. Let's see. His roster bonus last season was $4 million, I think, and he had a base salary of $6 million. So you spent $10 million on him last year. So over the course of the last two seasons, now obviously you don't plan on paying a guy $10 million in him being benched halfway through the season there. So effectively they spent $20.5 million on him in cash over the course of the last two seasons here, and obviously only got a year and however many games out of him overall. Now, what does $10 million buy you as far as a starting tackle go?
Yeah, it's tackles are expensive, but could you have drafted somebody and spent that on a different position? I mean, you can go back and configure this thing a couple different ways.
Well, they were still going to have to draft a tackle, and did draft a tackle this past year. So I guess the question is about had they not signed him in ahead of free agency in 2022, they were going to have to fill that hole some way, either via free agency, a contract potentially similar to what they gave him, or draft and insert the player in that way.
Sure. And I think that kind of being boxed into a corner with other needs, put them in a position, because that was they knew they were taking a quarterback in the first round. At least I'm pretty confident they knew that was the direction they were going to strive towards, that 2022 draft, and tackle was going to be off the board in that top round, obviously. So I think they backed themselves into a corner to give a bad contract.
I think that's how you have to look at it after the fact. And once again, it became even a worse contract when he got himself benched halfway through the season.
Right. So he'll get signed somewhere. Now, let me ask you this: I'm probably going to write about this for the next day or two. There were some, I think it's semi-vocal minority of people saying, why didn't they try to trade Okorafor? They should have traded him and gotten something for him. What do you think about that thought?
Well, you're talking about a guy entering the final year of his contract first and foremost. So there's that hanging over the head of whatever team would like to deal for him. Second of all, there's a trigger date involved, or was a trigger date involved, of that $4 million roster bonus. So if you were going to deal him, you're going to have to deal him long before the draft, before you paid him that $4 million roster bonus. That way the other team, the acquiring team, has to eat it at that point. And then that early in the process, and then how many teams are going to value him at $8.75 million, which is what they would have paid him. And if they deemed that too high, that was definitely going to be taken off the back end of whatever team wanted to give you in return for him. So, had you pushed this out to as close to the March roster bonus date as you could, what was probably the best case scenario that you get for him? Maybe a fifth, if you could find somebody that's in love with him. But once again, you didn't have a half a year's tape to show him, and in his previous tape before that wasn't great. So if anything, he probably decreased his own value in his own trade value in the first part of 2023. So yeah, I suppose you could have tried to push this thing out. As I would think that they probably made a couple of calls here in the last couple of weeks to say, hey, what do you want to give us for him? And I mean, even if you had a drop down date on your own calendar of the day after the Super Bowl, and all you had offered at that point was a 7th round draft pick, then you take the 7th round draft pick, right?
Sure. It is better than the no compensation they received by releasing him.
Right. So I would have to think that and you would have to once again think that some calls are made. If whatever calls you did, assuming they did make, if teams are going, nah, we're good, and if indeed, you had circled on your calendar that, all right, if we don't get him gone by the day after Super Bowl, we're cutting him out, right? Then that probably tells you all you need to know. Either at that point you move back your out the door date, and then still try to see, because look, once again, OTAs aren't going to happen. It's not like injuries are going to happen. So what's really going to change other than part of the pre-draft process?
Sure. And for those wondering, Pittsburgh will not get a compensatory pick because they released Chukwuma Okorafor. He did not leave as a free agent. So anyone wondering about that calculation, not a factor. I really didn't see him as having any value. Listen, when teams know you're about to cut a guy, which they knew Pittsburgh was with that roster bonus due, they'll just wait you out. I mean, there's no need to give a pick for a guy that's about to be cut. And there's no waiver system right now, correct? He doesn't have to pass through waivers, correct?
I'm going to have to see what did I say this got framed as, termination or a waiving? I'll have to.
I think it was termination. I believe the team site used the word terminate.
Yeah, let me double check on that, because that makes a world of difference. I would think with the season over, it would now be termination.
Right, there's no waiver claim, at least for a vested guy like him. I'm pretty sure there would not be that mechanism for him.
I'm logging in right now, and I will tell you that it says, no, it didn't process yesterday. Right. So we'll have to see if it processed today.
Okay. I believe the team site, for what it's worth, I know that's not the official log, but I believe they said terminate. Let me check here.
Hey, here's something that's interesting within this. Today's NFL transactions, and by the way, we're recording this Tuesday night. It has the Pressley Harvin being waived. Okay, so he
Okay.
is subject to waivers, and it has termination of Mitchell Trubisky. Chukwuma Okorafor is not on the Tuesday sheet.
Well, that's a
And
little interesting.
that is a little interesting. So he's not officially gone as of us recording this right now. Now we have seen in the past we're terminating him, and teams come calling last minute, and the news changes. The Steelers have traded, so and so's been traded. So that's interesting. I'm glad I logged in. So technically, he is still under contract with this team as of the Tuesday transaction sheet.
Unless it's a procedural thing. I mean, the team has officially announced it. Typically, when those things happen, the team does not officially announce it. It may get reported, by Schefter. This team is releasing somebody. Then later that day, the trade may occur. So, not holding my breath, he will get dealt. But it is worth noting to see his name not part of that group of three.
I would agree. And if it does show up on there at this point now, you would think it would be classified like the Trubisky move, which would be a termination of a vested veteran.
Right, which means he won't pass through waivers. And I say that to say that, one incentive for a team to trade for somebody who's about to be cut is to avoid the waiver process. But that's a non-factor here. And so they can just go freely talk to him, not have to worry about somebody claiming that right away or dealing with the contract, which they would have to if they traded for him. So point is, for a guy with that kind of money, with, I think, middling tape ahead of free agency, when teams are trying to get their cap ready for the actual free agent class, I didn't really see him having any value from any team. I know tackles are a commodity and there's a scarcity acquiring those guys, but for a 1-year rental at a decent salary for a guy that was going to be cut, Pittsburgh had no leverage here. Ergo, they really have no opportunity to trade him.
Right. So once again, if you're dead set on getting that paperwork done right now, and a team comes in at the last moment and says, we'll give you a 7th round draft pick for him, you take it.
Right. And we'll see if that happens. Not expecting it, but I didn't expect him to be waived or at least announced as released, I should say, on Monday. And here we are. So we'll keep our eyes peeled.
Right. Now, Pressley Harvin is a different conversation all to itself. Not that I think anybody listening to this expected Pressley Harvin III to be the team's starting punter in 2024. However, his base salary, his salary for 2024 was very, very minimum, just over $1 million. So what is the rush to get him out the door overall, especially when there's not, after top 51 replacement happens and all, you're not doing it for the cap space, overall. Is this just sending a message that we're done with him? So are we shocked overall that Pressley Harvin's not on this team or won't be the team's punter in 2024, I should say? No, but the timing of this is curious.
Yeah, to me, this just says you're not in our plans. We wish you well. We're just going to move on now, as opposed to stringing this thing along. And I think that's the calculation there. Obviously, the frustration, you could feel that. How many times did Tomlin mention or criticize or kind of make a remark about Harvin's punting during the season? Quite often. And so I thought he'd be kept through the summer, at least. Maybe go to camp, maybe go with somebody else to compete. But obviously, this team not even entertaining that idea, which is fine by me.
Right. It's fine by me as well, too. I think, once again, the timing on all three of these things is the big story.
Yeah. Because at first we heard Trubisky and went, okay, that makes some sense. And then the team just announced, before any reporting got to it, Okorafor and Harvin are gone too. And you're like, okay, holy cow. They really, they're cleaning house, and early spring cleaning from Omar Khan. Yeah,
not messing around early in the offseason. I think another part of the story now that's worth noting is, okay, they got to jump on these guys. There's obviously been a lot of talk of a few other guys that have roster bonuses attached to them in March. Mason Cole, Patrick Peterson, Larry Ogunjobi are the notable three there. What are there any hard conclusions to draw from this, or is this that those meetings are for? Those meetings can still take place between, look, nothing says that yesterday had to be the day that those guys went out the door. But if you're going to make cap saving moves with roster bonus due guys like Trubisky and Chukwuma Okorafor now, why would, if those other guys weren't in the plans, you would have thought maybe they would have went out the door at the same time. Not saying that still can't happen. Now, look, I wrote a couple of weeks ago that, I understand the consternation with Mason Cole, and look, there's a good chance that he's not the starting center in 2024. But don't be surprised if he survives that roster bonus date.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. It's not conclusive, but I do think who they didn't release is as notable and noteworthy as who they did release, because they're all veterans, Cole, Ogunjobi, and Peterson. And if this is at least partially a courtesy of let those guys get a jump on things, you would have done the same to any of those three names. And I think you can make strong cases of why all three will be kept, at least through the summer and through training camp. I mean, Cole, obviously, you prefer to find that long-term center option, but when we went through the exercise before, who they going to, pick up and who are they going to keep, when we talked about those names, I struggled to find the one name I could identify that said, okay, this guy's going to have that roster bonus declined and get released. We knew Trubisky was one, I'm pretty sure at least, and Okorafor was a no-brainer. But beyond that, I was kind of leaning towards those guys having their bonuses accepted and being part of this team through the spring and likely through the summer. So my expectation right now, put it this way, my expectation is for those guys to have their roster bonuses picked up in mid-March.
I would concur with that, because look, your defensive line has already got holes in it as it is, even with it looking like Cam Hayward, going to be back and all like that. Had DeMarvin Leal had a good second season, that would have changed the narrative a little bit, maybe when it comes to Ogunjobi. But and then center, who do you really have at center behind Mason Cole, at least until the draft gets here? And there are no guarantees in the draft. We know this team, if they can help it, does not like to be pigeonholed into, you have to take this position early in the draft because of the holes in the roster. So based on the evidence that we have right now, especially with the timing of the Trubisky, Chukwuma Okorafor contract terminations, you can't help but think now that Patrick Peterson, and look, you got depth issues at the cornerback position because of unrestricted free agents and all like that as well. So I don't see how you can't come out of Monday thinking that there is an even more increased chance of Mason Cole, Larry Ogunjobi, and Patrick Peterson being on this team long past their roster bonuses being paid.
Sure. I think part of that is because of the lack of options that you referenced. Now, granted, the quarterback room has been hauled out and there is no punter, but they're going to get a quarterback. They're going to find somebody. In punter, you can get a punter. It's not going to be the most difficult thing in the world. So I think with D-line, the depth was poor. At center, there is no true backup center right now. It's Nate Herbig, probably as your backup, maybe a Spencer Anderson, but they're going to likely add. And then corner, as you said, Wallace, Pierre, free agents. Peterson has versatility. They want to hold on to him. So right or wrong, and again, I think the reasons of holding on to most of those names are because they don't really have a lot of alternatives right now. But I think all three will have their bonus picked up and likely be in camp with the team.
And of those three, Larry Ogunjobi was probably the safest because they just gave him that deal. Now they obviously can get out of it, but there's that even more dead money. The way this roster is right now, and people are not going to like to hear it, you're better off with them than you are without them. And because of the Mason Cole roster bonus being even less, it's really the kind of same situation. Push comes to shove, if you get in a situation where you'd like your the center that you get in the draft, and you think a guy like Herbig or whoever can back him up, well, you can still cut Mason Cole before the start of the season, and all you have really invested in him is the $1.5 million roster bonus.
Or you can be a really experienced backup who can play some guard too. I mean, I think their hope and their plan is go draft a center top 2 rounds, let him compete with Cole, and Cole can even mentor a little bit as well. And then if the rookie beats Cole out, then either you can try to trade Cole or he becomes kind of a top backup for your team.
Yeah, and look, when I wrote that article a couple of weeks ago, I knew it wasn't going to be well received, but it looks like we're headed down that path.
It does. And with Ogunjobi, I mean, I don't disagree with anything that you said, but that contract's looking pretty rough. What is it? 4.5 sacks in 2 years with him. Not that sacks are the end all be all, but even just watching the tape, other metrics of production.
Right.
And when he's on, he's really good. I thought he had a good start to 2023. I thought he ended 2023 well. I thought the middle 8 weeks, he was basically invisible. Basically, whenever Cam Hayward went down and some more attention got turned towards Ogunjobi. So his play is just really hot and cold.
Here, here's the thing, and we kind of questioned that deal when it happened, and all. But assuming he does stick, I mean, we could one full calendar year from now, we could be talking about Ogunjobi out the door like Okorafor was this year.
Wouldn't be a bad bet if you're trying to get an early jump on those odds. So, and then Peterson, I think again the mentorship. He can't play outside, but if you can find a role as him as a slot corner and safety, kind of what he was doing, the last half of 2023, then I'm good with that for one more season.
Right. And we had that discussion of, what does it cost you overall in cash to keep him, especially in the shape of the room and the leadership he provides. I mean, you're looking at spending $6.85 million on him in 2024. Yes, I know his cap number is higher than that, but you have to look at this is what the player is worth in cash, and the state of that room right now. I guess you could spend, worst. I suppose it could be worse situation than have to spend $6.85 million on a guy that, now obviously you don't want to get him in a situation where you're having to play him 800, 900 snaps. But, if you had to do it, you had to do it.
Here's a really interesting question I have from yesterday's moves. We know the guys who are out. We know the guys who had roster bonuses that are still on the team as of now. What does this mean, if anything, for Allen Robinson, who we know cannot be under contract at his current number for 2024? But they released Harvin, who did not have a pending roster bonus upcoming, and so it wasn't solely the roster bonus guys. Does that mean there's a desire to try to work something out with Robinson, or does it mean they're just going to make that decision to cut him at a later date?
Yeah, that's another good question. Why wouldn't you send him out the door, especially with $10 million potentially being involved there? There's no way he's sticking on this roster at $10 million. we can agree to that and sure. have agreed to that already there. So has there already and how low do you have to go to warrant keeping him? You would have to think that if they can't. Maybe it's just a time factor. Maybe they've already had the discussions. Maybe paragraph 5 cut has already been made that hasn't come to light yet. There's still time to do that. The question becomes is how low does that have to actually be? Because let's face it, this team still has some cap issues to work out, and part of that is involved with. Includes Allen Robinson not making $10 million in 2024. So that's one of those to be continued, I think, kind of discussions. I mean, you could very well get to, a couple of days out from the start of the new league year, him not agreeing to take whatever cut you deem necessary, or maybe they've given him a deadline, say, we need to know whether or not you'll take this deal by March whatever, fourth, fifth, whatever, seventh. And if you don't agree to this, then we're going to have to cut you.
I agree. What I think this tells me is they at least want to keep negotiating and see if there is a path to keep Robinson. Because if Pittsburgh's thought was, we don't want to bring him back for any number, they would have just cut him yesterday and just said, be on your way. We thank you for your year, Allen, and we're going to just move on, get a jump on free agency like the others. I think it at least signals there's a desire to negotiate. And typically those things will not be wrapped up by the day after the Super Bowl, where they're going to go back and forth with their agent. And there's other things the agent has going on, other things the team has to attend to. And they probably aren't in a position to have this kind of back and forth negotiation, which they can do, throughout the next month. And so I think that at least signals there's a chance he could come back on a severely reduced contract.
Look, I think he's going to have to take, less than $2 million.
Sure. And that may take some time to negotiate and work out. Maybe Robinson wants to get a feel for what his market might be, talk to some people during the combine. I'm talking about his agency, not Robinson himself, and kind of get a feel for where he might stand before he starts kind of deciding exactly what he wants to do for 2024.
Right. And you would think out of common courtesy, you would cut him early along with the others if indeed you didn't think he was salvageable. So maybe something gets worked out there with him.
Yeah. And even if he's cut on March 5th, that still gives you time to talk.
Sure.
And, kind of get a head start on things. So we'll see. But I did think that was notable for him to not be included in that list, especially because that list included Harvin, who does not have a pending roster bonus.
And look, circling back to Trubisky and Okorafor, maybe the agents of both those guys said, look, it's the day after the Super Bowl. We all know what's going to happen here. We beg you to let us free now,
Right. They don't happen to share the same agent. I'm trying to get that information together.
I would have to look. I don't know for sure.
Unlikely, I'm guessing. But yeah, I think everyone knew where those names were headed, and even Harvin as well. He was not going to be on the week 1 roster in 2024, and so make the decision now. And Omar Khan's kind of he's a swifter moving guy than Kevin Colbert. He moves with a higher pace. Colbert was always we'll wait till the very last second, announce our cuts at 4 p.m. at the deadline, for your 53-man roster. I think Khan is a bit more urgency, which is not good or bad. It is just a different style.
Looks like Trubisky might be rep by Ref 1 Sports. Isn't that Ben Roethlisberger's old agency, Rep 1?
I forget. I just know Ben was represented by Lee Steinberg for the first half of his career. He was a Ryan Callahan after that. I don't know what the agency was though.
Yeah, Ryan. It's on the tip of my tongue.
Colbert.
I can't remember his last name right now. And Chukwuma Okorafor. Trying to find out real quickly.
Ryan Tollner was Ben's agent.
Tollner. That's it. But wasn't he part of Rep 1 Sports, I believe?
Yeah, I don't know for sure his agency. I'm assuming you're right. That feels like information Dave would have rattling around in his head for a Tuesday night podcast.
Ryan Tollner is a co-founder of Rep 1 Sports, so that covers him. Now, as far as Chukwuma Okorafor, I have to find out who his agency is.
What Steeler changed agents over some time in the last year? Was it Dan Moore? Someone changed agents.
I think it was Dan Moore, wasn't it?
I think so. I had a tackle in my head. I couldn't remember if that was Okorafor until I talked it out.
I will tell you in just a minute who Okorafor is represented by: Jimmy Sexton, Patrick Collins, and Ben Renzen of CAA Sports. So it looks like those two are represented by two different companies there.
Gotcha. So anyway, again, not surprising they will release. The timing was surprising. Again, the day after the Super Bowl, the first team to really start making some cuts, and we'll see if there are more to follow.
Right. Yeah, real quick, Alex, let me interrupt this show to tell you about a promotion with mybookie.ag. And with UFC 298 pay-per-view on tap this weekend, it's time to put your money where your mouth is at MyBookie. Sign up now for a host of boosted bets and exclusive money bag props that let you grab A-tier fighters at incredible odds. UFC 298 is the perfect opportunity to cash in on all your fight knowledge at mybookie.ag. And with the featherweight strap on the line in Saturday night's main event, you can stream and bet on it live right from the sports book, giving you the advantage until the final bell rings. Cash out and win or let it ride with MyBookie, baby. If you're looking for a little excitement before the fights begin, experience the thrill of MyBookie's brand new and improved casino floor featuring over 500 new games and progressive jackpots waiting to be won. So bet and play absolutely anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie. And that's ahead of UFC 298 and the big fight on Saturday night. And as always, if you're a first time and you sign up at mybookie.ag, make sure to use promo code terrible as you go through the sign up process as well too. So with that, we'll move on to this next portion of the show.
All right, Dave, with all those moves, the big question became, I know you probably got a million messages, what is the Steelers' current cap situation? And there are so many misconceptions and people trying to play capologist when they're probably not equipped to do so across the internet, but you study this thing all year long, you track it, you anticipate it. So give us a cap update.
All right. First and foremost, there's a lot of reports rolling around that the Steelers saved almost $13 million. Well, at its core, if you were to add up the cap savings and not take into account the rule of 51, that would essentially be correct. But in the offseason, you work off of a rule of 51. If a player leaves the rule of 51, he is replaced by the first player, essentially the first player outside of rule of 51. And then you would conduct that exercise with however many people leave the rule of 51 there. So in this case, you would look at it, you would take the initial cap savings and then replace those guys by number 52, number 53, number 54. And essentially that gets you to the Steelers clearing 10.123, a little more than 10.123 million when working off the rule of 51. So I hate to disappoint everybody that it's not technically $13 million that this team is clearing when you talk about top 51 roster displacement there. So that's an important part of the exercise there. If you base it off of those three moves and those three moves alone, this now puts the team based on an estimated 2024 cap number of $242.5 million. Once again, that's an estimation. We will not know the exact salary cap number. Last year we got it way early. In fact, I think it was end of January when we actually got that number. I don't think that's going to be, or it obviously is the case right now. We'll have to find out if we get that number next week, 2 weeks from now, closer, after the combine, something like that. But Joel Corey, guy, CBS Sports, former NFL agent, has been working off of an estimated 242.5 number for some time now. That's the number that I choose to work off of because of that. And based off of that number, I have the Steelers now effectively sitting their rule of 51 at 7.4, a hair over 7.447 million over the cap as a result of these three moves of Trubisky, Okorafor, and Pressley Harvin III.
Okay, so good update there. And yeah, cap savings has to be understood from a team standpoint. You can't just do where they were, what they were scheduled to count against the cap minus how much you're saving by them cutting against the cap. There has to be that displacement as well, which it can add up though. You cut three players, that adds up. It's a good chunk of change.
Right. And look, I mean, they, once again, this is why, at least with two of them in Mitch Trubisky and Okorafor, you knew they were going to be out the door because of all the work that this team has to do to get cap compliant. Now, people are going to say, man, 7.447 million over the cap. There's still a lot of work to be done. Well, it seems like a daunting number, but we already just talked about Allen Robinson and something going to be done there. If you cut him outright, there's $10 million minus whatever the roster displacement would be on that. That in and of itself, by cutting him, should get you cap compliant, quite honestly.
Right.
Based on a $242.5 million cap number. As we've already talked about several times since the season ending, something more than likely is going to be done with Cameron Hayward's contract. Cam has said that he's not interested in a pay cut. I believe him. I think you could see something along the lines of a 2-year extension, something that probably ends up lowering his cap number by, I don't know, $9.5 million or so at some point during the offseason. More than likely going to see an Alex Highsmith restructure that would clear you another $7.2 million. You obviously have other guys on this roster that probably are not going to see the final 53-man roster. You could have discussions about DeMonte Casey, Keanu Neal are two guys that you could entertain discussions on for starters there. So there's ways for this team, obviously, to trim more cap space. I would think my estimation is that at least come the start of free agency, start of the new league year in March, this team's probably going to want to be somewhere around, I don't know, $12 to $15 million under the cap to work with for the bulk of the offseason. And, by cutting Allen Robinson, and if you were to get another, let's say $9.5 million out of Cam Hayward's contract by some sort of extension or whatever, I mean, cutting Robinson outright and saving, $9.5 million on the Cam Hayward, whatever they do there. I mean, that puts you almost at that number at that point. Now, will they have to do the Highsmith restructure before free agency comes about? We'll have to see. You would have to think that there might be another one or two guys on this roster that might be gone before the start of the new league year.
Sure. So all of that is to say, cap-wise, by the start of free agency, they should have enough room to do what they want to do in free agency.
I would agree. And this next month's going to be real fluid. It might come sooner than later, as we've already seen in this. But this team's not going to have any problem getting cap compliant, and B, getting themselves in a position where they're 12 to 15 million under, so they can carry out whatever plan that they have in free agency.
Yeah, so I think there's a misnomer that Pittsburgh's in a really bad situation cap-wise, and they don't have an abundance of money they can create and have in free agency. But with the way that you can structure first year salaries in a contract, I mean, right, they can sign, the Isaac Seumalo's and the James Daniels in terms of the contractual value, $20-something million contract. They can make that work where they're projected to be at, correct?
Right, because you also have the top 51 displacement that carries on along with that too. So, you get a guy that his first year cap hits $6 million, you're going to have displacement involved with that causes you to eat up a little less roster space. Now, I will tell you this, and people, once again, people hate to hear this kind of thing. I know they do, but the Steelers, they like to have this hierarchy as far as, average per year goes, and they don't like to step on a lot of toes when it comes to that. So what do I mean by that? All right, if you look at the guys under contract for 2000, and I didn't know we're going down this rabbit hole, but here we go.
Here we go.
When you look at players under contract right now and their APY, average per year, TJ Watt obviously leads the list at a little over 28 million. Now, this is average per year. These are not cap numbers. All right. So don't confuse the two. We're talking about hierarchy of average per year. TJ Watt, a little over 28 million. Deontay Johnson, a little over 18.3 million. Minka Fitzpatrick, 18.247 million. Alex Highsmith and his new deal from last offseason, 17 million. And then Cameron Hayward at 16.4 million. You no longer have to worry about Chukwuma Okorafor, who's next on the list at 9.75 million. And then the next one beyond him is Larry Ogunjobi at 9.58 million there. Where am I going with all this? Long story short, do not look for the Steelers to sign a player in free agency this offseason, probably with an APY greater than 17 of at least 17 million. And depending on how things shake out with Cam Hayward and that 16.4, that might be the ceiling as well too. It would be very surprising, the way this team has operated in the past, to see an outsider come in from free agency with an APY this year greater than 17 million. It's just not how they work. It would be, I'm not saying it couldn't work that way. I'm just saying it's not how it generally works, and it would be a change in philosophy with Omar Khan. Now, look, there you could get some very nice players even if you went up to 16.9 APY. You know, you can go shopping for a few players out there and get that done. Realistically, I would look for some of the big expenditures to be
8 to 10 is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, maybe 12 million, depending on who the player is and the position that you're having to fill. In other words, if you're in the market for a high price corner, don't one of the top one or two. Look, we don't think who's the big name. That's
L'Jarius Sneed.
Who's the other one that's likely to get tagged?
Well, Jalen Johnson in Chicago.
Right. I would not look for a Jalen Johnson. I think most people think he's going to get tagged anyway. And then L'Jarius Sneed. If he's allowed to hit free agency, it's hard to imagine the Steelers being in the running for that. I think. What position do you think, this team's likely to address? The tackle position?
In free agency?
If they do address a position?
Yeah, I think, again, especially if their intent would be to move Broderick Jones to left tackle, then you have a big hole at right tackle. It is a strong draft class at offensive tackle. It really depends on who's available, less so than the position. You could, if it's a strong group in free agency and not a strong group in the draft, that kind of helps set your course of where you're going to target. But yeah, I think I would say even defensive line, they got to improve the depth there and finding that guy. It's so hard to find that guy in the draft and to get that guy ready to play year one. So I think D-line, tackle potentially, but those guys can be expensive. Something at corner, nickel, slot, or outside, or something like that is kind of where I'm headed right now.
All right. And you would think that a player probably be 30 years or under, right?
Yeah, I know they've kind of been more flexible on that in recent years, but you would ideally want somebody, off their first contract.
All right. You can't talk about tackle right now without the possibility, and he might end up being, a sought after guy here. Jonah Williams, obviously, with the Bengals, he's coming off of a deal. I think his APY is $4.4 million. What's the market going to be like for him? What's the competition going to be for like him? That's a guy that you could probably compete for in free agency,
Sure. I hadn't done much study on potential free agent names. The issue with Jonah Williams was he wanted to be a left tackle. He got moved there because they signed Orlando Brown Jr. and maybe he got used to right tackle. But he probably wants to play left tackle so he gets paid like a left tackle, because still there's a discrepancy in free agency money for left and right tackles. And I think his personal preference, his background is a left tackle. So if Pittsburgh wanted to keep Jones at right tackle, then it opens the door. If they're going to move Jones over, then Williams, I think, becomes a harder guy to get.
I think my takeaway, without going down this rabbit hole way too early in the offseason, there is they could potentially address a tackle in free agency if they want to, and not be in that $12 million range, if that makes sense. I think they could go down that hole, that avenue. I think potentially the same with defensive linemen as well too. Long story short, and really the point that I wanted to make here is, I would not look for this team to sign that $16-17 million per free agent.
Sure, which I think regardless they weren't planning on doing. But last year their top APY was Saymalu, correct? At think he was $8 million per year. The year before that was James Daniels at around, I think, a similar number. So
yeah, Sayamalo ended up being $8 million APY last year, I think, on his current deal.
And Daniels, did he get the 10 with some additional money, or was it more in that 7 to, or more like 8?
What did like
8.5?
9 point something, or
Yeah,
let's see here.
That sounds about right. So
his APY is 8.3333333333333 forever there. So and look, obviously inflation, cap inflation, and all has gone up. So once again, their big expenditure, whatever that might be this year, is more than likely going to be, like I think you hit it right when you first threw out the first guess, probably somewhere between 10 and 12 million.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I think we'll talk about it more. I know we have time, but right. A tackle, I think they're not. I don't think they're going to sign a big contract, even that $10 million type of tackle. I think they're going to look for more mid-level guy, veteran, versatile, and look towards the draft to be that potential option to start, because you got a bunch of tackles that are pretty good in this class.
I mean, you could go out and get you maybe I haven't even looked at the fullback list. You'd probably go out and get you the highest paid fullback and be able to afford that quite easily. I'm not saying they will.
Keith Smith was in Atlanta. He's a free agent. He's 31, but he could come over, follow Arthur Smith.
Yeah, that's obviously a possibility. Safety. Will this team do anything at a strong safety position? That's another position, I guess, that you could feasibly, depending on who's out there in the market price.
You mentioned Edmonds a while back.
Yeah, but that would be next to nothing, I would hope. There would be some, to me, that's a veteran benefit contract waiting to happen there. I'm talking about guys that you would spend any type of noticeable, APY on.
Okay. Yeah, I got you. Again, I haven't checked the list on who's available, but yeah, strong safety would make a lot of sense.
Long story short, again, is that don't expect this team to be super active, especially when it comes to the higher dollar guys.
But in a one-word summary, or one sentence summary, you would say their cap situation is adequate.
Oh yeah, they're fine. They should have no issue not only getting cap compliant, but it will be interesting to see what the official number is start of free agency. And look, don't even take me down the road of what they have to pay for after the fact, because there's obviously, you got another $18-20 million out there that you got to account for at some point, long after the draft comes and goes to 52nd, 53rd player, practice squad. What else is there? $6 million in available cap space to start the season with. Maybe another $2 million winds up on IR to start the season. Obviously, you have the draft pool offset of 3.5 to 3.9 million that you have to account for. But those are all down the road. As I always like to say, you have to divide this thing up as lines in the sand based on the calendar here. And first and foremost, you need to get to the start of the new league year and a budget to work with what you want to spend in free agency first and foremost. And they're not going to have a problem getting to that point. And it might be as simple as just cutting Allen Robinson and extending Cameron Hayward and working down his cap number by $9.5 million, and then putting off, an Alex Highsmith restructure until later on in the offseason.
Yeah, I think that's honestly my amateur view of it. The way to create cap space for free agency are those two moves and maybe one more release of a Neal, a Casey, somebody like that, and then help give you the relief that you need for all the things after the fact. Is where the Highsmith restructure comes in. And that probably alone won't create all the space that you need, but other roster moving and other veterans that get cut in camp will create that for you as well.
Right, because whatever your rule of 51 is come the first day of the start of the new league year, not all those guys are going to be on the 53-man roster.
Right. There will be veterans that get cut camp that don't make your 53 that create cap space for you right there.
Right.
All right, David, I feel like today's an infomercial podcast but wait, there's more. I feel like there's just a ton of information here. And I had forgotten about this until it was reported late last night. We knew this was coming, but
don't forget to tell them about Eddie Faulkner either.
Yeah,
That's the bonus. Oh, I've given a bonus away.
Next 10 minutes, if you order while supplies last, we'll get you your Eddie Faulkner information. One more player-related piece of news, though, hard news. Jeremiah Moon, that waiver process has officially been processed. The waiver claim, I should say, has been processed. That happened back in January, could not take place and be made official until the day after the Super Bowl, so Monday, and that has officially gone through. So Jeremiah Moon now officially Pittsburgh Steelers claimed off of waivers from the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, look, and as we talked about at the time, overall, this is a very shrewd move. I don't know if he's going to work out or if he's going to stick or what have you. We got plenty of time to figure that out. You've already done a nice film room on him to get a good idea of what he brings to the table. To me, he views more as an edge prospect than anything else, but he does have the flexibility in the limited time that he played for Baltimore to play off the ball if you want to get creative or something like that. But I think overall they probably do look at him as an edge. I think he has special teams experience as well too, so that might be a factor. And you don't know what's going to happen with Marcus Golden this offseason. It gives you another offseason body to throw in that room. And the interesting aspect about this is you are claiming a guy that technically is not under contract for 2024. However, he is set to be an exclusive rights free agent, and that should mean that you just offer him a 1-year tender at what would I say, $910,000, I think, and he obviously has to accept that as an exclusive rights free agent. So you're by claiming him, even though he's not under contract, you're guaranteed to have him this summer. And who knows? I mean, this might end up being a guy that offers you some depth in at the outside linebacker position, a guy that maybe can fit in on a couple of special teams units. And once again, you don't know what's going to happen with Marcus Golden at this point. He might work out. He might not. He may work out. He might not work out. But you essentially stole him from the Ravens via this process, and that makes for a very shrewd move.
Sure, there's really no risk involved. He's got some tools. He's big. He's long. I think there's some traits that can be developed. He is pretty raw right now, but he has done well on special teams. He can run a bit and he can hit. I think he's got to develop as a pass rusher and even work on his run defense, play with better pad level, use his hands better. Is really underdeveloped there, but there are some traits to work with for, a second-year guy. He had, good tape out of Florida, but he had a bunch of injuries, and so that's what caused him to fall out of the 2022 NFL draft. Got some burn in Baltimore in 2023, had a couple of good performances against Pittsburgh, and so, good move. They'll tender him, hope he'll come back, he'll be part of camp.
Right, and time will tell whether or not he sticks.
Eddie Faulkner, as you mentioned, if there wasn't enough news that came out on Monday, according to Aaron Wilson, running backs coach Eddie Faulkner has signed an extension with the team. No information on the number of years, but I'm going to assume it's a 2-year extension because typically in Pittsburgh, positional coaches sign 2-year deals. And when Faulkner signed an extension back in 2021, that was a 2-year deal. Extension happening now because his contract was expiring. And so that's just an assumption, but I think a pretty safe one to make. But regardless, Eddie Faulkner, who was the interim OC post Matt Canada firing last year, now back as running backs coach through the next at least couple seasons.
Yeah, look, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think most listening to the show find anything wrong with that.
No, I'm happy. I was a little worried he might leave somewhere because kind of getting passed over for the OC job, no consideration for that. Would that upset him a bit? I know Jordan Schultz had a line that he may get some OC looks in the future, not this year. All those positions are filled, but I'm happy he's back. He's a good coach. He's developed guys well. I think they enjoy playing for him, so good move there.
Right, I agree.
All right, here is the portion of the show where we talk about Justin Fields. So buckle up for the first, I shouldn't say the first time, nor the last time we'll talk about that. Been some more conversation. Really, it's kind of heated up in the media circle. I think you have to understand the difference between the talks heating up from the media side of things and the football side of things. We have no actual reporting about really interest there, but Adam Schefter on Monday made a special note of Mike Tomlin loving Justin Fields, and his name has now been connected to Pittsburgh even more than it already had been. So we'll talk about it again and again and again, Dave, but and it's kind of the story right now.
Yeah, and this goes to the forefront right after the Super Bowl. You have the Steelers involved. You have a potential quarterback involved. You have Adam Schefter being the one to put whatever you want to call what he put out there, and that's going to create noise. It effectively did. It's all the talk right now, or at least today it seems to be on Twitter/X, and I imagine several talk radio shows as well too. But overall, nothing has changed here other than really the Steelers quarterback room getting one fewer, if you will here. The fact remains, the most important part of the conversation that a lot of people don't know or choose not to acknowledge, whatever side of this thing that you're on. Half of you listen, there's the group's probably divided up into three groups here. A third that absolutely believes that the Steelers should go after Justin Fields. Another group that believes the Steelers absolutely should not go after Justin Fields. And then the third group is basically, well, I'll just sit back and see what happens here and see what the details are associated with it, and then armchair quarterback it after the fact. Here's the important part that I can't stress enough here, and it's the fact that any team and obviously Pro Football Focus put out there, made sure that have out front and center that they think what they say, a second round and a fifth round, a second round this year and a fifth round next year seems like a reasonable trade, compensation part for any team that looks to acquire Justin Fields. Let's assume that's right on the money. All right. Any team that's going to invest a second round pick plus whatever else, let's say the fifth round pick is correct there, is more than likely going to turn around after acquiring Justin Fields and pick up his fifth-year option. It would be quite surprising if there didn't. Is there any rules that says they absolutely have to pick up the fifth-year option? No. But you put yourself in a gamble in that situation where, okay, we gave up a second-round pick. Are we fine with him being our starter in 2024, him crapping out, not being what we signed, what we thought we were going to get here, and then in so many words, just sending him on the way and we're out a second round pick? All right. So that's the first thing that you would have to be comfortable with. The second thing would be is if you did pick up the fifth-year option on him, which I would be quite surprised anybody that traded for him and gave up a second-round pick, I'd be quite surprised if they did pick up the fifth-year option. Then you're talking about, that's a fully guaranteed amount of, in the neighborhood of $22 million that you would be on the hook up for 2025. So if indeed you did go down that path and you did trade for Justin Fields and you did pick up his fifth-year option, you would essentially be marrying yourself to him for the 2024 and 2025 seasons. And if you were talking about Pittsburgh here, there is no competition at that point. There is no Kenny Pickett competition or whatever. Justin Fields would be your starting quarterback at that time. So that's an important part of the conversation. Draft compensation and the fifth-year option talk are two things that really need to be highly scrutinized when you're talking about not only the Steelers, but any team dealing for Justin Fields. Because remember a couple of years ago, the Jets traded Sam Darnold away for 3 picks. I think a couple of them were in the following year, what have you. And the Panthers turned right around and picked up his fifth-year option. We all know how that turned out. Now, I'm not saying the two are, that's exactly how things are going. I'm just noting that that's how the process went. And you would imagine that, especially if you got a second round pick involved, that would be the end result with a team like the Steelers, to give up a second round pick to turn around and pick up the fifth-year option on him. If you're fine with all that, and here's where it gets to, depends on what side of the fence that you're on here. If you in your heart of hearts, and the Steelers in their heart of hearts believe that Justin Fields can be a top 10 quarterback, that they can immediately turn him around starting in 2024 and get top 10 quarterback play out of him, does it really matter what you give up for him and the fifth-year option attached to him? if you truly believe, if you're listening to this and you think, man, Justin Fields is just what this Steelers team needs to put them over the hump, and if the Steelers feel the same way there, does it essentially matter about what you give up for him and what the fifth-year option amount is?
Short answer, no, it does not.
Right. If you are convinced that guy can turn your franchise around and be a top 10 quarterback, then giving up a second-round pick and a fifth-round pick and then turning around and picking up the fifth-year option, all that seems like nothing if you firmly believe that guy can be the guy.
And you might as well trade away Kenny Pickett at that point because you're done with him. He's done with you. You move on. That's me personally how I would handle that situation.
Yeah, maybe you throw it in on the deal. I don't know, but he would not be a happy camper at that point. Yeah. Once again, there would be no competition. That's your guy. There would be really no reason to entertain the thought of bringing back Mason Rudolph at a big number. You just go out there and you try, and assuming that Kenny goes out the door, hopefully you would be able to get Kenny to hang around one more year. But if you didn't, you would just have a bunch of guys in there at cheap or near cheap salaries to be the backup to Justin Fields.
Yeah, you need to get a veteran in there. And to be clear, I'm not saying to trade Pickett. I'm saying if you're of the mind of let's go get Fields, I think at that point, just it's not good for the environment, the locker room environment, to have that Pickett in there, the former first-round pick. I think you move on, you go find a veteran guy if you are convinced that Fields is your guy.
Right. So if you're listening to this show and you are 100% on board for this to happen, have at it. I would suggest getting a sign, standing outside front of the South Side and picketing and all like that. Conversely, if you're on the other side of this, I would be on the other side of the
get a sign, separate sign.
Right. And stand on the other side of the block. Yeah. It all comes down to, in your heart of hearts, and really the Steelers at its core, because nobody cares what you and I think. Nobody cares what the fan base thinks when it comes to the organization. If the organization feels that that's the guy that's the missing piece that can be the franchise quarterback for not only the next 2 years, but beyond, but specifically the next 2 years, then you go out and make the deal, especially if it's for a second and a fifth. I mean, you make the deal.
Yeah, if you're that convinced of him and his ability and what he can do for your franchise. But what I think gets missed overall, I'm speaking just kind of largely of the Twitter discussions and the media discussions, is does Pittsburgh have a desire to go make a big trade for Justin Fields? All their indications are they do not. From what Art Rooney said about unlikely they're going to make a blockbuster trade, to Mike Tomlin having confidence in Kenny Pickett and then also wanting competition for Kenny Pickett. And as you so well stated, if they traded for Fields, there is no competition. Fields is your starter, case closed. And when Tomlin was asked, do you think the starter for 2024 is on your roster right now? Tomlin said, yes, I do. There's been no indication they have a desire and appetite to go make a big blockbuster splash trade for a quarterback right now.
And that's mostly what we have addressed up until now, the plausibility factor and the educated plausibility factor related to this. As far as I can tell by reading the tea leaves so far, Mike Tomlin and Art Rooney II are still on board with Kenny Pickett, thinking they can salvage him. On top of that, you have to, at least on the surface, take Art Rooney for his word with what he said. What was the exact quote about blockbuster trade for a quarterback that he told Andrew Stocky?
I'll pull it up here. It was essentially, unlikely to occur, but I'll get the exact quote here for you in a second.
All right. So essentially, if you take at least the reading of the tea leaves, and yes, we know people lie and people are going to say, well, things change. Absolutely, they do. But taking everything that's out there to this point in consideration, that's the way it feels the organization is going to go, albeit with the addition of addition of Tannehill or re-addition of Mason Rudolph or something along those lines. So if you want to talk about the plausibility factor here, that's where Alex and I think both come in on the aspect of not thinking that this is going to happen.
It's a lot of bark. I don't think there's much bite there in that conversation. Rooney's comment about the quarterback situation and potentially trading for one was, quote, I don't want to create a lot of speculation out there that we're going out looking to make some big blockbuster trade at the quarterback spot. I put it in the unlikely category, end quote. Well, speculation's out there, unfortunately. I mean,
Right.
It's going to be out there. That will be out there until Justin Fields has a new home. And we assume the Chicago will trade him. We assume they will draft Caleb Williams #1. And so until those things are settled and finalized, this discussion will continue. But to me, this is a much more of a media story than it is a likely to happen in Pittsburgh story. Could it happen? Who knows? I don't want to rule it out. I don't want to sit there and say there's no chance of it. But I'm not seeing really any indication that that's the direction this team is going to go.
As I sit here in mid-February, nothing that I see so far outside of just mere speculation leads me to believe that they will go down that path.
Right. And that's for all the things that Rooney and Tomlin have said over the last month.
Mike Tomlin had to get that football justice tattoo covered up, probably, if he went down that road. I'm joking, obviously, here. And I guess the other part of the conversation people will throw at is, why are all these odds? Why to push in the odds? I'll tell you this. The Super Bowl just happened. There's probably not a lot of gambling going on right now. When you get something that causes a stir like what Adam Schefter said, it's a prime opportunity for all of these betting houses to put their odds out there to make it look like there's some easy money to be gained. And I'll just leave it at that. That's why I think you see everybody and their brother on Twitter/X making sure they put their odds out there of how the odds have lowered on Justin Fields and make it look like this is like the consensus is that this is going to happen now.
And you tell me, because you know this stuff better than I do, aren't odds partially just influenced by where the money is going?
Sure.
From where, so you hear Schefter say this, and people start putting money on Pittsburgh, and that just naturally increases the odds from the Vegas standpoint towards Pittsburgh.
Right. They want to keep it balanced on both sides as best as they can. And on top of it, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some manufacturing going on there to encourage betting, because of the news and all like that. But long story short on this particular topic, I'm not reading too much into the odds moving on Justin Fields with the Steelers being the leader in the clubhouse to be his next team.
Yeah, if Pittsburgh made every move based off of what the odds maker had Pittsburgh predicted to be the favorite to do, we'd be looking at a much different roster right now. I mean, there have been just countless instances of Pittsburgh being the odds-on favorite or a top favorite for player X or to make move Y, and they rarely, if ever, happen. So take it with one big grain of salt.
So look, would it be quite interesting to see them do that and see if they got behind it, if indeed Justin Fields could be that guy, especially based on what we have seen so far out of Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph and to a lesser extent, Ryan Tannehill, in addition to what we already have seen out of Justin Fields to this point. I mean, it would make for an exciting 2024 season. I will say that. And once again, if the team decides that they think they can fix and turn Justin Fields around, they firmly believe, and why wouldn't you? You're not going to make the deal if you believe otherwise, right?
Right.
If they firmly believe that he can be that guy, then why wouldn't you give up a second and a fifth?
Sure, but I think their standpoint is to give Kenny Pickett one last opportunity. They want some competition. They want him to be pushed, but they don't want to close that chapter entirely right now. And trading for Fields would do that.
Right. So look, could it the feasibility point factor of it, could it get done? Especially if it winds up being, and look, talking about trade compensation and value and all like that. I mean, that's an endless discussion. Could it happen the way it's laid out there? And Could they financially make it work, especially as low as his salary is in 2024? And could they feasibly turn around and pick up the fifth-year option and work around that next year? The answer to all those questions is yes. All right. But then there becomes the plausibility aspect of it.
Yeah, I know we're talking about it again and again here, Dave.
And again, and again, and again.
Right. We'll kind of table it from there because this will be an ongoing discussion. But none of the, I wouldn't even call it news, none of the speculation or media chatter the last 24 hours has changed my opinion on the likelihood of Justin Fields becoming a Pittsburgh Steeler. I think the odds are still very low.
Same.
All right. So I'll see you again when you come back for the next podcast on Monday, I'm sure, with the next round of Justin Fields talk. Just a couple other odds and ends things here. Joe Haeg, former Pittsburgh Steelers offensive lineman Joe Haeg, retired on Monday. We wish him well in his future endeavors and moving on with life's work. He played with Pittsburgh in the 2021 season for the Steelers. Handful of games there. And for Wednesday on the site, I have a post about Zach Ghazzani. I when they hired their coaches, I kind of started with studying Tom Arthur, the new quarterbacks coach, to get a background on him. Kind of circled back to Zach Ghazzani. I know Josh Carney wrote a really good piece about his background and kind of his style. Kind of dove into it myself. And I think he's really what Pittsburgh needs. He is a butt kicker of a coach. Like he's a no nonsense, tough love, no BS, not going to tolerate all this crap kind of guy. And that's what Pittsburgh needs right now. I think he's a guy that cares, and players have come to love him and respect him. But he's not going to tolerate guys rounding their routes off or showing half effort or kind of not playing to the standard they have to play. And that's probably what Pittsburgh needs right now.
Yeah. What did I say? That quote from Virgil was standard something. I forget what the exact
standard over feelings, I believe.
Right. And that's kind of my initial look at him and reading some of these quotes from players that have played for him. I don't think he's afraid to step on any toes, so to speak. He'll be your friend, but he still expects you to get the job done. And the standard, the job comes first.
Yeah, there's going to be some guys who get pissed at Zach Ghazzani in camp, and good. Mm-hmm. They probably need some of that, and they'll work through it, and it'll be fine. But I certainly, learning more about his background, I can certainly see why he was the guy Pittsburgh wanted to tap as their next receivers coach.
All right, I look forward to reading that. When's that come out tomorrow?
Wednesday. We're recording this Tuesday night, but yeah, Wednesday morning. You guys, it's even a little video cut up of kind of some of the interesting quotes I've been able to pull from him. So, anything else here, Dave, for us to talk about today?
All right. No, I think that's about got it, Alex. Full show today.
All right. Yeah, pretty busy. If we have time for maybe one or two emails, we can get to those before we close out today's show.
All right. We'll fly through them here kind of quick here. I'll start with Rick Smith says, hey, Dave and Alex, was wondering how plausible it is to trade Deontay Johnson to the Bears for Justin Fields. Do you think a draft pick would be involved also? And what round pick do you think we can get for Pickett? Thanks from Rick in Delaware. First and foremost, Rick, man, I see Deontay Johnson's name being bantered around on Twitter/X. And I mean, I would be absolutely floored if they dealt him. So how plausible is it to trade Deontay Johnson to the Bears for Justin Fields? I mean, I suppose, nothing's impossible or impossible, as I like to say, but I will be absolutely shocked because if you trade Deontay Johnson, you make that room that much more lighter. You have to address the position most definitely in the draft. You don't know what you got there. I would be floored if Deontay Johnson is dealt.
I think the Bears are done taking Pittsburgh receivers. I think they went down that road once before and they didn't have a good time doing it. So I think they're closing the door on that. It's not going to happen. Listen, Deontay's going to be a Steeler in 2024. Beyond that, I don't know what's going to happen with Deontay. Will he get extended? Will he become a free agent? We'll see. But he's going to be a Steeler in 2024. You don't trade for Fields, trade draft picks, and trade a receiver for him, and then you're left with not a lot of weapons, lacking draft capital to go get that guy. I mean, look what happened with Bryce Young in Carolina. They trade DJ Moore as part of that deal to get Young, and he just got nobody to throw to, and it just has a miserable season with the Panthers. So don't cut off your nose to spite your face. If they trade for Fields, you're trading draft picks for that guy.
Mm-hmm. What about Kenny Pickett?
I have no idea. I couldn't tell you. A 4th round pick. It would depend on who's still high on him, who was interested in him. Would he go to Denver? I think Sean Payton. Didn't Sean Payton have some talked about him at some point, I think, in this process, either as an analyst, I forget where he was at that time. But it would be a mid-round pick, maybe.
Yeah, I'd have to look back at who all was at the pro days and all like that there. Let's see. Lane writes in, hey guys, thank you for everything you guys do on the show. If you guys could hand pick the Steelers quarterback room for 2024 out of all realistic trade candidates, free agents, rookies out of the draft, or quarterbacks that are already on the team, who would y'all take? I know it's still early and y'all may not have a great answer, but I just wanted to know what you guys would think and not necessarily what you would predict. Oh man, I mean, you've got all this talk about Kirk Cousins and the likelihood of him not getting out of Minnesota, and Baker not getting out of Tampa Bay. And I mean, there's obviously the Russell Wilson stuff, and you wonder about, what are you talking about? A contract for him? Obviously, you couldn't just do a 1-year contract with Russell Wilson and it'd be feasible. You would think it'd have to be a multi-year contract, and you're probably going to have to marry yourself to a couple of years to him. Then you have all the Justin Fields talk. I mean, I will just go back to part of the things that we said during the actual, Justin Fields conversation, part 7. If you were all in as an organization on Justin Fields, and if the compensation were a 2nd and 5th round pick. Now, this is not me. I'm talking about the organization, because personally, I don't find myself being all in on Justin Fields at this point from what I've seen. But as an organization, if you were, then why wouldn't you make that trade? I guess of all the realistic stuff, and I guess technically we don't view the Fields thing as realistic at this point, right?
Well, I think from our standpoint, he's realistic in terms of he's feasible to get. If you wanted to go acquire him, there's nothing really stopping you. I think he's saying don't pick Caleb Williams because there's really no realistic path for Pittsburgh to go get Caleb Williams.
Right. So, I mean, there's so many layers to this with him saying realistic trade candidates. I mean, I have to know compensation, and as far as free agent goes, who's guaranteed to hit free agency. I
think he's just saying just rule out the top 3 quarterbacks in this draft, and that's everything else is probably pretty fair game. All right. Well, I mean, I would consider the whole Justin Fields discussion. Okay. I mean, is that where you would want to go if you were Omar Khan? Would you make that deal? Because you don't seem entirely sold. No, I mean, I'm not. But on the flip side, I'm not sold on Kenny Pickett being able to turn it around either. So, if you made me pick right now between a quarterback room of Justin Fields and whoever, or Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph, I'd probably take the Justin Fields route. Yeah, but is there any other quarterback you would want more than Fields? Anyone else that would intrigue you more than him? You got Kirk Cousins, you got Russell Wilson. I think Kirk Cousins. Could you win with Kirk Cousins? Could you win with Russell Wilson? I think you could, but once again, what is the feasibility and the contractual, and if you tell me money is no object, just make it work, then I would probably go with Cousins. But I mean, does he necessarily fit what Arthur Smith would want to do? I mean, you got a new OC that's part of this equation now as well too. So you'd have to rewind the whole damn thing at this point, Sure, I get that. I mean, I don't have a great answer. I don't spend much time thinking about my hand-picked ideal scenario. I think you got to find your long-term option through the draft, and so that obviously realistically won't be Williams or Drake May or Jaden Daniels. I would have to take a long look at. I haven't studied those guys enough to have a well enough formed opinion past the top 3. Same, but I think that's the group I would be studying: Bo Nix, maybe JJ McCarthy, but I've watched some Michigan football and I don't really feel like he's the guy. And then Michael Penix from Washington. And that would be, I don't have a desire to go trade for somebody. I don't want to do the veteran stopgap option. You would have a veteran, Mason Rudolph, Tannehill type as a competition or backup, fine, but not as a, long-term, this is our guy. That'd be my approach to it, though.
And I'm looking at this entire question as winning now,
Okay. I mean, I just view it as like your ideal scenario to win short-term, long-term. But again, for me, it basically would be, a high-priced rookie, a veteran type, and then a third arm from however you can get that guy.
Here's the correct answer. You got to do whatever it takes to get better quarterback play out of that room in 2024. And, once again, it's way early in this thing. So, I mean, I guess if you want to look at feasibility wise, it would be quite interesting to see Justin Fields be put into that room. I'm not advocating for it. I mean, he's asking, everybody should have their questions about Kenny Pickett right now. And, you sort of feel like what the ceiling is on Mason Rudolph, and the same with Ryan Tannehill,
Yeah, but bottom line is, it's not really up to us. We'll just see what the team does and react from there.
Right. So I don't know if that's a good enough answer, what he was looking for, but that's the mid-February answer you get.
All right. Anything else so we can kind of close out today's show?
All right. In the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter /X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button up right navigational bar. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button and follow the directions that way. $25 for 1 year from the time you sign up. Get you an ad-free version of the site. Alex and the gang will be back on Friday with another show for you, and into next week as well too. So interested to see what they have lined up. But I'll be out of here MIA for probably a couple weeks, maybe not that long, but at least a week and a half there. So Alex and them will have you covered as always. Thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.